Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 346. Chapter 346. When Pierre and his wife entered the drawing room, the Countess was in one of her customary states in which she needed the mental exertion of playing patience, and so, though by force of habit she greeted him with the words she always used when Pierre or her son returned after an absence, "High time, my dear, high time. We were all weary and waiting for you. Well, thank God," and received her presents with another customary remark. "It's not the gift that's precious, my dear, but that you gave it to me, an old woman." Yet it was evident that she was not pleased by Pierre's arrival at that moment, when it diverted her attention from the unfinished game. She finished her game of patience, and only then examined the presents. They consisted of a box for cards, of splendid workmanship, a bright blue Sevres teacup with shepherdesses depicted on it, and with a lid, and a gold snuff-box with the Count's portrait on the lid, which Pierre had had done by a miniaturist in Petersburg. The Countess had long wished for such a box, but as she did not want to cry just then, she glanced indifferently at the portrait and gave her attention chiefly to the box of cards. "Thank you, my dear, you have cheered me up," said she, as she always did. "But best of all, you have brought yourself back, for I never saw anything like it. You ought to give your wife a scolding. What are we to do with her? She's like a mad woman when you are away. Doesn't see anything, doesn't remember anything," she went on, repeating her usual phrases. "Look, Anna Timofeevna," she added to her companion, "see what a box for cards my son has brought us." Belova admired the presents and was delighted with her dress material. Though Pierre, Natasha, Nicholas, Countess Mary, and Denisov had much to talk about that they could not discuss before the Countess, not that anything was hidden from her, but because she had dropped so far behindhand in many things that had they begun to converse in her presence, they would have had to answer inopportune questions and to repeat what they had already told her so many times, that so-and-so was dead and so-and-so was married, which she would again be unable to remember. Yet they sat at tea around the samovar in the drawing-room from habit, and Pierre answered the Countess's questions as to whether Prince Vasily had aged, and whether Countess Mary Alexievna had sent greetings and still thought of them, and other matters that interested no one and to which she herself was indifferent. Conversation of this kind, interesting to no one yet unavoidable, continued all through tea-time. All the grown-up members of the family were assembled near the round tea-table at which Sonia presided beside the samovar. The children with their tutors and governesses had had tea, and their voices were audible from the next room. At tea, all sat in their accustomed places. Nicholas beside the stove at a small table where his tea was handed to him. Milka, the old gray Borzoi bitch, daughter of the first Milka, with a quite gray face and large black eyes that seemed more prominent than ever, lay in the armchair beside him. Denisov, whose curly hair, mustache, and whiskers had turned half gray, sat beside Mary, and with his general's tunic unbuttoned. Pierre sat beside his wife and the old Countess. He spoke of what he knew might interest the old lady, and that she could understand. He told her of external social events and of the people who had formed the circle of her contemporaries and had once been a real living and distinct group, but who were now, for the most part, scattered about the world, and like herself were garnering the last ears of the harvest they had sown in her earlier years. But to the old Countess, these contemporaries of hers seemed to be the only serious and real society. Natasha saw by Pierre's animation that his visit had been interesting, and that he had much to tell them, but dare not say it before the old countess. Denisov, not being a member of the family, did not understand Pierre's caution, and being, as a malcontent, much interested in what was occurring in Petersburg, kept urging Pierre to tell them about what had happened in the Smenikov regiment, then about Arakiechiv, and then about the Bible Society. Once or twice Pierre was carried away and began speaking of these things, but Nicholas and Natasha always brought him back to the health of Prince Ivan or Countess Mary Alexeyevna. Well, and all this idiocy, Gosner or Tatoivnova, Denisov asked, is that really still going on? Going on? Pierre exclaimed. Why, more than ever. The Bible Society is the whole government now. What is that, mon cher ami? Asked the countess, who had finished her tea and evidently needed a pretext for being angry after her meal. What are you saying about the government? I don't understand. Well, you know, maman, Nicholas interposed, knowing how to translate things into his mother's language. Prince Alexander Golitsyn has founded a society, and in consequence has great influence, they say. Arakiechiv and Golitsyn, incautiously remarked Pierre, are now the whole government. And what a government! They see treason everywhere, and are afraid of everything. Well, and how is Prince Alexander to blame? He is a most estimable man. I used to meet him at Mary Antonova's, said the countess in an offended tone. And still more offended that they all remained silent, she went on, nowadays everyone finds fault. A gospel society. Well, and what harm is there in that? And she rose. Everybody else got up too, and with a severe expression sailed back to her table in the sitting room. The melancholy silence that followed was broken by the sound of the children's voices and laughter from the next room. Evidently some jolly excitement was going on in there. Finished, finished! Little Natasha's gleeful yell rose above them all. Pierre exchanged glances with Countess Mary and Nicholas. Natasha he never lost sight of, and smiled happily. That's delightful music, said he. It means that Anna Markovna has finished her stocking, said Countess Mary. Oh, I'll go and see, said Pierre, jumping up. You know, he added, stopping at the door, why I'm especially fond of that music? Do you know why? It is always the first thing that tells me all is well. When I was driving here today, the nearer I got to the house, the more anxious I grew. As I entered the anteroom, I heard Andrusha's peals of laughter, and that meant that all was well. I know the feeling, said Nicholas, but I mustn't go there. Those stockings are to be a surprise for me. Pierre went to the children, and the shouting and laughter grew still louder. Come, Anna Markovna, Pierre's voice was heard saying. Come here into the middle of the room, and at the word of command 1, 2, when I say 3, you stand here, and you in my arms. Well now, 1, 2, said Pierre, and a silence followed. 3! And a rapturously breathless cry of children's voices filled the room. 2, 2! They shouted. This meant 2 stockings, which by a secret process known only to herself, Anna Makarovna used to knit at the same time on the same needles, and which, when they were ready, she always triumphantly drew, one out of the other, in the children's presence. All right, and that concludes my reading of chapter 346. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 346. Happy holidays! If the internet is to be believed, the holidays are not a source of familiar reunion and joy, but rather the front lines of the culture war. Go ahead and Google holiday political fighting. You'll find a distasteful menu of nearly 40 million hits to feast upon. It's not the 12 days of Christmas so much as a double 6-day war. It doesn't have to be this way. We, like the young Bazukov and Rostov characters today, can apply some of the philosophical tools we've developed this year to guard against frustration born of disagreement, political or otherwise. Old Countess Rostov, as we learned yesterday, isn't the most agreeable person to spend time with. She's irritable, cantankerous, and misinformed. Yet the youth of the household don't avoid her. They engage her on her own terms. They find contentment not in wishing for the Countess to behave as they want, but instead by being content with how she wants to behave. This can be a difficult task for something as emotionally charged as politics. It can, however, be done. One need only nurture a liberal heart, maintain a degree of epistemological modesty, and exercise mindful toleration. Happy holidays. Daily meditation. From Sextus, I learned a benevolent disposition and the example of a family governed in a fatherly manner, in the idea of living conformably to nature, in gravity without affectation, and to look carefully after the interests of friends, and to tolerate ignorant persons, and those who form opinions without consideration. He had the power of readily accommodating himself to all, so that intercourse with him was more agreeable than any flattery. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 346 of War and Peace. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the description, along with my wish list from Amazon for books and movies. If you decide to support my work by purchasing one of those, that'd be great. I'd like it a lot, and we'll set up a Zoom call to discuss that movie or that book. All right, tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 347 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.